Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes to let a few other folks kind of come on in, but we will get started right at 10:30 on the dot to be mindful of everybody's time. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this early, beautiful Saturday morning. We won't keep you too long, but we really appreciate you joining us. This is a NHPRC webinar on roadblocks of property and neighborhood research. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We are actually recording this webinar, and the recording and slides will be sent to all attendees next week via email. So keep an eye on your inbox through the email that you registered through. To find that information. Also, if you have questions throughout the webinar, please write them in the Q&A box rather than the chat box, and we'll go through those at the end of the presentation. We'll have a Q&A session, so we'll get into all of that. And with that, next slide, please, Mariah. Welcome to our NHPRC webinar series. So this is our fifth and final webinar associated with our NHPRC grant, generously funded through the National Historical Publications and Records Commission. My name is Kate Daly. I'm the Visual Culture Archivist at the Atlanta History Center and also the project manager for this grant. Again, after this webinar, we are recording this and we will send out this information via email. The other webinars that we have recorded, if you have not attended for those, that information can be found on our website for our NHPRC landing page, along with the finding aids for the processed grants, or excuse me, processed collections and other resources associated with this grant. And in just a moment, I'll post the link to that landing page, but we'll also send that out via email. And with that, I will let Mariah take over.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Worried that's a thing. Okay. My name is Mariah Isbell, and I'm a project archivist here at the Atlanta History Center. I'm a term staff member that I was processing the 4 collections for this NHPRC grant. And today I'm going over briefly the process collections, although it's kind of a refresher because one of the other webinars introduced the collections a bit. So I will show more specifics of the collections and show some newer examples. And then I will speak about how the process collections can help fill in any research gaps. And then, as Kate said, we will have a Q&A session. Okay, so these collections were processed between January 2024 to November 2025. It's September, so I'm still processing the last one. The first collection that was processed was the Atlanta Department of City Planning. This collection is dated 1920 to 1997, undated. This collection is arranged in 4 series. The Atlanta Fulton County Joint Planning Board, dated 1920 to 1974. The Board of Zoning Adjustment Records, dated 1922 to 1997, undated. The Zoning Review Board records, 1954 to 1984, and the Planning and Development Committee records, dated 1957 to 1973. These records contain meeting minutes from the boards and committees. These minutes include summaries from public hearings and executive meetings about decisions pertaining to zoning requests and discussions about citywide redevelopment. Because these records were processed, they now and have been allowing access to the public on local and government opinions, civic involvement, and they are detailed transcribed accounts on the process of developing in Atlanta. So those are just some of the research highlights from this collection. Here are two examples. The first one on the left is from the first series. This is the first meeting of the City Planning Commission dated July 11th, 1920. So this can again be found in series 1. And then the image on the right is a scan of a page from a general public meeting of the Board of Adjustment on October 17th, 1958. This can be found in series 2. And then I have two other examples from series 3 and 4. On the left is a meeting, it's a special meeting from the Zoning Committee of the Board of Aldermen. In this meeting, they are going over zoning regulations and district maps for the southeast and northeast quadrants of the city. This can be found in series 3. And then on the right is a scan of a public hearing on the Butler Street Urban Renewal area from the Urban Renewal / Redevelopment Committee on November 22nd, 1957. And that can be found in series 4. The second and third collections that were processed were records and visual arts materials of the Atlanta Urban Design Commission. The records are dated from 1973 to 2008, undated, and the visual arts materials are dated 1912 to 2005, undated, with the bulk of the time spanning 1973 to 1995. The records are not arranged in a series format, but they do have groupings, which are administration, cooperation for Olympic development in Atlanta, known as CODA, historic nomination forms, neighborhood architectural survey forms, and a spread of publications, surveys, park plans, development guidelines, and newspapers. A significant portion of the records are about CODA and the steps that committee took to revitalize Atlanta in preparation for the Olympics. And then a bulk of those records are neighborhood architectural surveys, which describe the neighborhood structures and landscapes such as the address, owner, neighborhood, condition, history, and local significance. And then the visual arts materials are arranged in 3 series: neighborhoods dated 1973 to 2005, undated; Georgia Architectural and Historic Property Surveys dated 1975 to 1999, undated; and maps dated 1912 to 1988. These visual arts materials contain 19,312 items of both color and black and white photographic prints, negative slides, as well as maps, floor plans, and architectural drawings. Together, both of these collections are now and have been able to highlight the city's push for importance on preservation and conservation of its history and legacy. Because these collections were processed, there's now more information and images of neighborhoods that are able to fill in gaps that we were previously had in our repository. And like one of the common questions, it's kind of a funny question that people ask, is if we have a picture of their house, and because of all the images we have now between the AUDC materials and the appraisals, it's kind of like a maybe we do actually have a picture of your house. Both of these links will take you to the finding aid, and then there are some digitized images that were digitized before the NHPRC grant, and that is also available at this link for the neighborhoods. And that is on Album. This first example is a document for the Pratt Pullman core buildings from the historic nomination form section of AUDC records. The historic nomination form section contains documentation tracking the process of either a building or neighborhood receiving National Register of Historic Places status. This is an example of the neighborhood surveys from the AUDC records. This is for the Atlanta Waterworks at 660 14th Street. They have a question mark by that street number, so it's possible it might be incorrect, but that's what they wrote down. And this is located in the Home Park neighborhood, or at least that is how they listed as in Home Park. And then these are images from the AUDC visual arts materials. These are images from Adair Park. So we have one here for a lady at her house on her porch, and one here with a man sitting on his stoop, steps of his house. We have some more images from Adair Park at the top and Sylvan Hills at the bottom. And then these are also additional images of Sylvan Hills from the AUDC visual materials. And then this last example is an example of a property survey that contains an image. So the property surveys and the records don't have images. The surveys with the visual materials do have images attached to them. And this is 784 Avenida Street, Southwest in the Westview neighborhood. So we have someone working on their car in this image at their house. The last and definitely not least collection process for this grant are the Atlanta Real Estate Board appraisals dated 1923 to 1984. The appraisals are kept in their original order, which is numerical order by appraisal number. There are roughly 10,000 appraisals that were completed by an appraiser or a committee of appraisers staffed by the board. However, that does not mean there are 10,000 properties, as a single appraisal can have anywhere between 1 to 20 plus properties. From processing these appraisals, the content of the appraisals commonly includes an application for valuation, the appraisal report, a correspondence, and a receipt for the services. The appraisal report is structured in 3 sections of a legal description, a narrative description / discussion, and the appraiser's final valuation. The legal description provides the district, land lot, and county, as well as information related to what streets surround the property, how far the property is from the city, major roads and highways, schools, churches, and grocery stores. It will also provide whether or not the area has city improvements such as electricity, paved roads, or sewage. The narrative description / discussion focus more on the property itself and will describe what type of structure it is, such as being a house, business, etc., and also what it is districted for, such as residential, industrial, or commercial. In a discussion, the appraiser will report on who owns the property or who is renting the property, which people primarily live in the area or in that specific property, and the status of the property and of the neighborhood, such as is it stable, improving, or declining. From the legal description and discussion, those findings are then considered when the appraiser is reporting their final valuation. Along with these appraisals are visual arts materials, including photographic prints, blueprints, maps, and architectural drawings. You won't see many visual materials in the early years, but once the appraisals get into the 40s, like the mid 40s, and later, it's approximately like a 1-to-1 ratio for materials, an appraisal or a property and a visual material. It's incredible how these appraisals and visual materials together because it's providing a full picture of development in Atlanta and the surrounding areas, which may have been areas we as an organization and repository didn't have access readily and easily available to, and now we do. The scope of these appraisals is, of course, all of Atlanta. I can confidently say it's all of Atlanta. Fulton County from Milton to Palmetto, and DeKalb County from Dunwoody to Ellenwood, and Atlanta to Stonecrest. The appraisals also cover significant areas within the Atlanta metropolitan area, including Cobb, Clayton, and Gwinnett counties, as well as some areas in Douglas, Henry, Rockdale, and Paulding County. There are also some far and like random appraisals for out of state or out of like region. I've seen one for Athens, Clarke County, and I've seen some locations in North Carolina, which is interesting to me. Because the Atlanta Real Estate Board was a private company, these appraisals are providing a different view on Atlanta's value and development from that of the Department of City Planning and the Atlanta Urban Design Commission's public and local governmental view. The appraisals are also a great resource for additional research for house and neighborhood, business, and infrastructure development history. And then lastly, here are some collection highlights that appear in the appraisals. So the Atlanta Express Highway System, which is part of like the national highway system, this pops up in the appraisals between the mid 40s to late 50s, early 60s. We have some Atlanta Airport expansion appraisals going on. There's Techwood Homes development, which I thought was really interesting. They are appraising the land for where Techwood Homes would then be built. Stone Mountain Park development pops up quite a bit. And just some standout estates. I'm new to Atlanta, kind of. I've been here for 3 years. So these are names that stood out to me. I'm sure there are other names that were prominent, but there is an estate for Asa G. Candler, which I thought was interesting. There's an estate for Walter McElreath, our building's namesake. And then there's an estate for Alfonso F. Herndon. And then there's a couple properties that that family owned that there are appraisals for. And now I just have some examples of appraisals. So this is from appraisal 2427 for certain improvements on the municipal airport property dated June 11th, 1952. On the right is a list of properties, their location, estimated rental value, appraisal value, and then other values that they had listed. These are two of the properties that were listed on that previous page. So the one on the left is on Airport Drive in College Park, and the one on the right is on Harrison Road. I looked up the one on the right. Airport Road doesn't really have anything on it other than it's part of the airport. This one, I wasn't really sure since it didn't give a street number, but there is a part of Harrison Road that still exists, and there's a part of Harrison Road that is now where the airport is. So I'm not sure exactly, but it's possible that this was taken away for the airport expansion of the airport. The airport was already built. This is airport expansion. This is from appraisal 2939. This was 17 parcels along the Baker Memorial Drive section of the North-South Expressway, dated December 3rd, 1954. This is parcel 4. It is located on Baker Street between Piedmont Avenue and Butler Streets. I did look this up. The highway is there now, so this area is taken up by highway. This is parcel, it's the same appraisal, parcel 9. There's a vacant lot on Lundy's Lane, also an area. This is what it looked like before, and the highway, part of the highway is there. And then this is also from the same appraisal. This is parcel 12. This is a house/apartment that was on 186 Harris Street Northeast. Street numbers have changed since then, but looking at an older map where this house apartment used to be, based on old street numbers, that the highway is there now. And then this last example is from appraisal 4538 This is additional property for the Atlanta airport dated March 23rd, 1960. This is parcel 26. It is of 3544 Bachelor Avenue in East Point, Georgia. I was verifying these, but the Bachelor Avenue doesn't go past, I think, the 3300s anymore, and everything past that is where the airport is. So this is what that area would have looked like then. And now part of the airport expansion is there. All right, now that I've gone over the records and materials process through this grant, I want to pivot into the next section on how these collections can fill in research gaps, particularly when areas aren't documented or there's a lack of resources that weren't processed or searchable. And I'd like to also highlight how the addition of these collections has removed some of the roadblocks for our repository as well. I've created some mock research inquiries that reflect the types of inquiries received by our reference team in order to highlight and explain how these collections help fill in research gaps. So to start off, we have everyday research. This comes from researchers, students, patrons, people of the public who want to use the collections for simple finds and inquiries. So our first mock inquiry is, I just moved to the old Fourth Ward neighborhood, and I'm wondering if you have any photographs of this neighborhood from the 20th century. Inquiries that are about general neighborhood histories have always been an area that we have been able to provide access to. And with the process of processing the collections through this grant, we have even more documentation and images that allow us to highlight the majority of neighborhoods in Atlanta. With this specific inquiry on photographs of the old Fourth Ward neighborhood, before on album, so this is talking about the digitized images. If someone were to filter for still images of old Fourth Ward, there used to be about like 80 images available, but now because of the images that were digitized, there's now 192 images. And then in general, Old Fourth Ward is a common area that is mentioned a lot through the AUDC records, and it's an area that has a lot of appraisals from the Atlanta Real Estate Board appraisals. So it's just been a large increase. So we just have more images that we're able to share with the public because of these collections. Inquiry 2, mock inquiry 2. I live at 164 Gordon Terrace Southwest in Mosley Park. Do you have any information about my home? Inquiries are of specific house addresses such as this for a previous roadblock for us as a repository. Unless those a well-known house or address, our response was that of no, but we have images of a neighborhood that you can look through and look at similar homes and see what those look like. Since the processing of collections for this grant, specifically the Atlanta Urban Design Commission records and the visual arts materials and the Atlanta Real Estate Board appraisals, we can now point people to resources that list complete addresses or are divided by street names to see if we do have information about your home. I picked this address because I know there is a property survey with this home address, and there's an image of it from the 70s. So that's one specific example of this specific address does exist, and there is a picture from 50 years ago. I think that's the 70s. For in-depth research, that is researchers, patrons, students, and the public who want to use the collections for an assignment, paper, or patrons who have a little more time doing historic house research. So this mock inquiry is, I'm an urban studies student at Georgia State University, and I want to research how public opinion and city development discourse in Atlanta compares to that of another city. I am particularly interested in large civic structures. Do any of your collections provide insight on structures and decisions such as this? So inquiries such as this one are considered in depth because it's not only going to take us as a repository to see if we have the materials and information, but it's also going to take the patron to have the commitment to look through the provided materials and gather what they're searching for. From processing the collections in this grant, completing the Department of City Planning records increases the access and availability to answer questions such as this. The Department of City Planning records provide public discussion of buildings, structures, such as those large civic venues developed for the betterment of the city and its citizens. Such structures include the Municipal Market in the 1920s, now known as the Sweet Auburn Curb Market, or the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium in the 1960s, which is now demolished, but you can replace that with the Mercedes-Benz Stadium as a more modern day example. This wasn't necessarily a roadblock for the repository before, but with the processing of these records, it is now an addition that highlights city planning and provides public opinion and insights. So our second mock inquiry is, I'm in the process of restoring a home that I recently bought. I don't know any information about this house and would like to research it. Is there anything you could help me with to learn a bit more about its history over time? Historic home research is a commonly asked about topic, and it's also one of our focus areas. With the process collections, as stated in the previous slide, we continue to be able to provide materials that focus on home and neighborhood research. And now we have more materials that strengthen our repository as one for historic home research. Unlike the inquiries from the previous slide that we're looking for specific information for an address or neighborhood and wanting to gauge what we generally have, this inquiry is different in that they're wanting to know about the property's history over time. Specifically, the AUDC and Atlanta Real Estate Board appraisals have not only expanded which neighborhoods we have information on, but they have also expanded the decades we have information on that we have and are making accessible to the public. AUDC, of course, provides us with property surveys and visual arts materials, but the appraisals are able to provide financial information. Some provide architectural drawings, floor plan layouts, and they date farther back into the 1920s. There are often repeat properties in the appraisals as well, or an owner or company is just having their appraisal reappraise every couple of years. So it's possible that they would be able to track changes to the property over time and learn about its history that way. The main roadblock here is understanding that this type of home or property research takes time, and we are able, or even more able now, with the processing made possible through this grant, to provide a patron with many resources that we can lessen their research roadblock of not knowing where to start. So extensive research comes from researchers, students, patrons, and the public who want to use the collection for lengthy time, multiple appointments, and just really going down a high level rabbit hole research. So I will put them both up because they're pretty lengthy. So the first one is just a mock student from Clark Atlanta University, and they are wanting to look at urban renewal and public housing developments in Georgia. They noticed that they've looked through our collections already, but they had more specific questions about structural plans and decisions that were being made for developments. And then the second inquiry is from a mock visitor who came and was fascinated by the Olympic Games exhibit. And they wanted to they liked learning about how Atlanta won the bid for the 1996 Olympic Games. And they just so happened to be creating a podcast that documents the history of the cities that host the Olympics in modern times, and would love more information that we have available to the public, specifically the effects of gentrification on the city and being able to compare the past to time of the Olympics, what's happening, and the aftermath. What makes both of these inquiries extensive is that they require the use of multiple resources. While these inquiries can surely be answered without the inclusion of the process collections from this grant, it is because the collections and their current availability and access, it now opens and can answer and create a fuller picture of the discussion in Atlanta from the local government point of view and public opinion, from a photographic point of view and a private company's opinion and value on land and properties in Atlanta. For the first inquiry, use of the Department of City Planning records will be useful because of their transcribed public hearings and its series on urban renewal. The appraisals can provide research on structural plans and give more insight on the decisions of where certain developments are built, as in the appraisals often state like what they think an area could be better used for in their opinion, or if that area should be rented or owned, and what the surrounding areas, what type of neighborhood community it would be better suited for in relation to housing developments. For the second inquiry, use of the Department of City Planning records and the AUDC visual materials and records will be useful in tracking the establishment of urban renewal within the city and reviewing the discussion. Oh, the light went off. Reviewing the discussion of public opinion on the neighborhoods and areas that were selected for revitalization due to their inclusion or proximity to the Olympic ring. Using the Atlanta Committee for the Olympic Games records will be beneficial for their overall understanding of the games in the city, but since they want to research the effects of gentrification, the AUDC and city planning records more focused directly on that than the ACOG records. The roadblock for these patrons likely surrounds wanting to find precise information, and a previous roadblock for us would have been having the general information, but not having resources that can directly point them to the information they are searching for, which we now do. And now we will start the Q&A, but I'm going to turn the light back on. 1 second.
Great. Thank you so much, Mariah. I don't actually see any questions in the chat, or in the Q&A, which is definitely fine. Just something to note, the slides and the presentation, of course, are not available quite yet, but we will be working on posting these online. And so y'all should receive an email next week. And on those slides will contain all of these links to everything that Mariah has been talking about. Something else that I'll note, and Mariah really did touch on this very well already, but these collections as a part of this grant supplement a lot of other resources that we have on researching historic property at the Atlanta History Center. So, we do also have things like Fulton County tax plat books, tax property cards that show kind of materials that residents were essentially made out of and how they were laid out. We also have Sanborn fire insurance maps, plat maps, Atlanta City directories, building permits, and other types of real estate records, as well as the City of Atlanta records. So we have a lot of resources on Atlanta already. Let me just check. I thought I saw something, but no, never mind. So just to say that this is a really incredible resource to kind of continue that research. One thing that I thought was a really valuable part of this process were actually the amount of photographs that we've seen kind of through this. Let me see. I do see a question that popped up. Oops, excuse me. Mariah, I'll ask this question, and I think I already know the answer, but do we have any information on the history of HOAs in certain neighborhoods?
Like the development of HOAs?
I guess maybe April, you can clarify, but just kind of the history of HOAs in specific neighborhoods. So if neighborhood has an HOA, if there's any information about that.
Not necessarily specific to HOAs, but from development in any meeting minutes. Not necessarily development, but I know in the city planning minutes, when certain neighborhood changes would happen, people from the neighborhood would come and speak on why that would either be like, what's the opposite of a benefit? The opposite of a benefit for them, and like how that could change the structure of their neighborhood, but it's never been like a concrete created HOA in that way.
And then I do see a question if there are any plans to digitize more Sanborn maps. Unfortunately, there are a lot of copyright issues around those maps. So we do have, there is a base map on the Library of Congress that's available, but that is the only one that is kind of has been able to be digitized, unfortunately. I will say we do make those available to patrons. So if you are able to come into the reading room ever and make an appointment with us, everything that we do at the Atlanta History Center and specifically the Keenan Research Center, appointments are free of charge. All you have to do is make an appointment through our research desk to come see that material. So while we haven't been able to digitize them, we do try to make them as available as we can to patrons. All right. I do not see any other questions in the chat or the Q&A. But if you want to pop over to the next slide, Mariah. If you do have any other questions, either about the NHPRC grant as a whole or generally about the Keenan Research Center and the services that we offer, you can feel free to email me. My email address is down at the bottom. If you have any inquiries on the process collections specifically or any questions about what might be contained in those collections, feel free to email either Mariah or myself, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you would like to make an appointment at the Keenan Research Center to view any of the process collections, we are available by appointment Wednesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. We just ask that you give us at least 24 hours notice for appointments. And we'll try to accommodate you as best as we can. And our information is here. You can either give us a call or email us. And we have posted our NHPRC landing page in the Q&A already, but this will also be sent out as a link in the slides. And that's where you can access blog posts that we've done about all of the collections that we've processed, the past webinars, and any other additional resources that we have. Right now, as Mariah mentioned, we did process and create finding aids for the first 3 collections in this grant. So those are available online, and the real estate appraisals collection is being processed at the moment, and that will be made available probably sometime early next year. So definitely keep an eye out for that, and we'll of course promote that on social media. And also, if you have a few minutes, we would love feedback on this webinar. So you can either access the feedback form on the QR code that is on this slide. We'll also be sending that out via email. We always love to make our programming better and serve our patrons as best as we can. So we really, really appreciate your feedback. And again, just another thank you to the National Historical Publications and Records Commission for funding this grant, as well as this webinar series. And so with that, I think that is everything.
I will say this, I know I threw out a lot of information, but there's so much more information in all of these records. I can only look at and read so much, but you can go on deep dives throughout these 4 collections in tandem with the other collections we have to use for historic house research or research of Atlanta. Yeah. And then I also like to give a special thanks to Kate for moderating and assisting with the B Statistic appraisals, to Ben Conklin, he wasn't here, for also assisting with the B Statistic appraisals, to Gina Jones for scanning the images for the webinar, and to Erica Haig for existing and providing feedback. So,
yes, thank you so much for that, Mariah. All right. Well, we will let y'all get back to your Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you so much.